the thing that's often missed is that people aren't on board with that change. If you want the change to be adopted, and let's face it, most change relies on people doing something differently. If you start with that endpoint in mind, if you feel involved, if you feel heard, if you feel like your ideas and suggestions are valued, you're much more likely to get stuck in and put in that extra effort. Choose your hard. So you can have the hard work unpicking it and trying to get everyone back on board at the end, or you can have a bit of hard work up front. But actually, it's quite fun. It's an interactive experience. It's not like death by spreadsheet. Actually, try and design something that people are going to find engaging. That ability, that agency, feeling comfortable with change and like being able to play your part in a change, it's such an underused commercial lever.
Hello, it's your leadership coach, Estelle Reid, and host of Optimizing Leader Brilliance, the place for calm, confident, and strategic leadership. Stay tuned to the end for a mini coaching and reflective practice. Find out more about my services by heading over to estellereid.com. Davina Ripton is the founder of Change Ready. She spent 20 years plus helping organisations lead change in complex environments without burning out the teams or bolting on the people stuff. She's built frameworks, coached sponsors, trained managers, and supported leaders. She helps people get clear, confident, and prepared without jargon or overwhelm. Davina is really well qualified in change management and is also a personal and business coach. Her superpower is combining the best from the project world with techniques from coaching and other business disciplines to create fresh, creative, and engaging ways to change. So welcome, Davina. Thank you for coming on. I can't wait to hear what you're going to talk to us about. And I think it's such a relevant topic. It comes into business all the time. Before we dive into change and what you do for a living, can you give us all a sense of what your typical day looks like and also what are your non-negotiable routines? I know you're a runner. Let's dive in.
Runner.
What do you mean, kind of?
To like manage expectations. I'm not a good runner. But yes, I do enjoy it. So every day starts with a cup of tea in bed. That's a
Yeah.
non-negotiable. And then from there, it's no 2 days are ever the same, which I know most people say. But I live in the beautiful Peak District. So one thing I do try and do is get outdoors, whether that's a walk or a run or a joggle or whatever it feels like on the day, depending on how things feel. And then from there, I guess that's my chance to just tune into the day, get a bit of perspective, time in nature, all of that good stuff. And then that really sets me up for the day. And in terms of client work, it could be anything. So it might be a coaching call or delivering a workshop or writing a strategy or comms. So yeah, the work's really varied, which I love. And then mixed in, obviously, sales and marketing, the usual. And then I'm also chair of a climate charity, so local climate action charity. So there's usually something to do to keep things ticking along, answering emails, that kind of stuff.
So tell me about so how far do you run?
Oh, like during the week, it's probably just 3 miles, and then at the weekends, like between 4 and 6. But it's not, I've never been like traditionally sporty. So it's just really to keep yourself healthy as you get older and mentally as well, just to, yeah, get that time outside. All the best ideas come when you're outside. Yeah, that's
How
the
do
main
you
thing for me.
capture them then? Because I'm like that when I go out walking, and with my brain as it is, as I've matured, I literally have to capture the idea as soon as it comes in, otherwise it
Yeah.
goes. What do you do?
So I'll either do like an iCloud note or I just literally create an appointment. You click on your calendar and I'll just type in this random note. So when I get home, I just have a full calendar full of these random notes.
No, I think that's you. I think that's great because we just need a way of capturing those ideas, don't we?
Yeah.
Do you ever, I don't know, I might just be talking about myself here, but do you ever overwhelm yourself with ideas? Because I do.
Yes. For the years, I've tried to structure stuff. It used to be all paper and that's just, and we've got all these notebooks full of great ideas and then nothing ever happens with them. So I am a bit better at like organizing stuff now. So at least if I don't use it, I know where to go. It's not lost.
Yeah,
So
no,
yeah.
that's great. And that's the point, is it's not lost.
Yeah.
So tell us your origin story.
Uh,
It's you.
this is really strange because you were my coach at the time. So you helped me uncover this. So my origin story, I guess, is growing up, I had lots of change. So I moved house every couple of years because of my dad's work. And that meant, obviously, as a child growing up, you don't have any choice over where you go. You don't know where you're moving. It was the times before the internet. So you couldn't look up on Google or on the internet, what's this place like? You had no idea in your mind where you were going. So that cycle of new schools, new friends, new teachers, that really was the start of my kind of interest in, and that thread that's pulled all the way through my life that's attached to change. So yeah, as part of that, I guess it taught me lots of great stuff, lots of skills of landing into a new situation and making new relationships, new friendships really quickly, scoping out the landscape, what are the cliques, what does the teacher expect of you. So lots of really good kind of adaptability and resilience, but equally it also made me realise that it's not always made that comfortable. So for some people, those new situations are quite difficult. And I think that does leave a bit of a legacy as you grow older.
And what do you think it is that makes change not comfortable?
I think for me, what I unraveled was it's that lack of control, that lack of agency. I think when change is something that's done to you, it does feel uncomfortable. And one of my values is fairness. And I think when that fairness value is, when that button's pressed, that kind of hits quite hard. So I think not having control over a situation, not having a say, that does, I think that triggers in people. This isn't fair. This isn't, I'm not being heard. I'm not being valued. So I think that's probably what makes it feel uncomfortable in that situation.
And so, from your perspective as a consultant who goes into businesses, what's the biggest problem that you see or mistake that you see organizations making in relation to change?
I think it's probably what I call the illusion of control. So I think change is uncomfortable for leaders too. It's not just the people who are on the receiving end. And we're not trained, are we? So in school, at work, considering change happens every day to all of us, we never really get any kind of training for it. So I think leaders quite often feel out of their depth. And especially if you are seen as the person with all the answers, when a change comes along, sometimes the tendency is to exert too much control. They don't act until they've got all the answers to the questions. They want a really tight project plan with everything really detailed. They're holding people to account, or everything has to be managed in minutiae, or it's just left to somebody that they've chosen that can roll that change out. And I think sometimes that is from fear because they don't feel that they have necessarily a framework to work with.
And what problems does either delegating it completely or managing the minutiae cause in organizations?
I think, like I said, it's almost this illusion of control. It's not actual control. So, whilst the new system you're putting in, or the new process, or the new structure, whilst that might be really well planned out, the thing that's often missed is that people aren't on board with that change. So, how I help leaders, how I work with them, is to design that change experience from a people first perspective. So, if you want the change to be adopted, and let's face it, most change relies on people doing something differently. If you start with that endpoint in mind, then you can work backwards from there. If you're investing tens of thousands, sometimes millions of pounds into a new change, you want to get the benefits, you want to get the return on investment. And to do that, you really need people to come with you on that journey. I guess the way I try to help leaders with that is to relinquish some of that control and involve people at the front. So you're designing it together, co-creating that change. And that just totally changes the dynamic. If you feel involved, if you feel heard, if you feel like your ideas and suggestions are valued, you're much more likely to get stuck in and put in that extra effort than you are if somebody just comes along and says, you need to do this differently now.
In fact, I was working with a leader just this morning, and it was a similar thing. They're driving change in the business, and they've got two members of staff who are just absolutely digging their heels in and not moving with them.
Yeah,
What does that
that's,
look like
I think
from?
that sorry, go on.
No, I was just going to say, because you said something really interesting. You said you design the change experience. So you start with the end in mind, and then I'm guessing, do you work backwards, or what does that look like? Can you give us an example?
So designing that is basically a really interactive session. And like you said, it's starting with that end point in mind. So what is the vision for the change, getting real clarity and making sure everybody's on the same page. That's a real problem because quite often, even if you just have 1 degree difference with every person, it means they all shoot off in different directions. So getting that real consistent, everybody on the same page at the start is really important. And I use this kind of design, deliver, embed 3 stages. But what we do is almost like a spin of the wheel of what do we know already. So what does that vision look like? Where are we aiming to get to at the end? The next one is the stakeholders that are involved. Who do we need to bring together to help shape the change? Who understands what the problem is that we're trying to solve and why it matters? What's their experience through this whole change journey? And is that different for different people? And then the next stage is what do we need to communicate to them? And how do we do that in a way that's really conversational, not broadcasting, not just telling them what to do? And that aspect is very much part of this process where we're saying, what do we want people to know, feel, and do at each stage of the change? So as we go through that journey, being really deliberate and intentional about planning what that experience feels like. And then the next element is coaching. So how do we put the training, the coaching, the mentoring, the guides, whatever the support that they need is, how do you wrap that through and weave it into that experience as well? And then the final element is culture. So how do you then weave this new way of working through every element of how the employee kind of experiences their day-to-day work? I think people get really hung up on the culture side. They see it as something like really immovable and it's going to take years for us to change this. But we're in a situation now where change is so quick, it's happening so frequently that we really need to design that culture change in from the start. And that might be if you're putting in a new system, do you need to recruit slightly different people with different skills? Is the onboarding different? Are the objectives that you set for them and the way you reward their performance, does that need to shift? Does the ongoing training, the ongoing kind of policies and processes, the ways they work, the change needs to be really stitched into everything on that journey. It sounds like a lot of work, but it means that it's just part of how we work every day. It's not something that's separate. It's not a change that stays as something temporary. It's part of how you work moving forward.
It's so, when you listen to it, it's so involved, isn't it? There is so much. I had this the other day with a team. They're trying to embed new values, and they're almost there in that they've been through this process before, but they lost sight of what they were already doing. The business has changed a little bit, so they've changed direction. The values have changed slightly different. I think you're so right in that it doesn't have to be really elaborate, does it? It was literally like, you just need to update your onboarding process. But it's making sure that everything is aligned, isn't it? And
Yeah.
everybody's going in the right direction.
And when you think about how much people are investing in these changes, I often liken it to if you, I know you love a nice restaurant or hotel, and when you have that experience, you're like, oh God, I just felt like a princess. It's just like floating along. Everything just works and it feels really welcoming and it's a lovely experience. And those things don't happen by accident. Somebody has planned out that customer journey and they've looked at every touch point and made sure the right people are going to be there at the right time. They know what they're wearing, what they're saying. It's really intentional. And then at work, somehow it's with our internal colleagues, it's fine. We can just tell them what to do and they'll figure it out. So, yeah, considering the investment we're making in these changes, it is a bit strange that we don't train people, we don't give them the support, and we don't design that experience as we would a customer. We just kind of let them figure it out.
Can you do a little thing to help me out? And that's to simply hit subscribe or the follow button now, wherever it is that you're listening. So that's maybe on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple, because that will help the podcast get found by other people. And that then enables us to keep going because we continue to keep growing. What would be 5-star amazing though is if you could also leave a review. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your support. You said something there that really struck a chord. It's quite shocking, really, when you think about it. It's intentional, that experience.
Yeah.
And that is really clever to make that analogy between a hotel or a restaurant. I've been watching that documentary about the luxury Yorkshire hotel. I don't know whether you've
Oh,
seen
I haven't
it.
seen that. No.
Well, they are very intentional about everything. And that whole experience from the moment that a person arrives. Now, we happened to come across this hotel by accident. We were on holiday and we just happened to book in the restaurant. We didn't stay because it's something like £1,000 a night. So we were staying in probably £1,000 a week cottage. Anyway, we pulled up to this entrance, talking about an intentional experience that somebody has planned it all the way through. There was a guy on the gatehouse for a start because I thought, oh, we're just coming for a meal. He got our name on the list. He knew that we
Yeah.
were going to the restaurant, not to the hotel. It was really theatrical. He'd got like the uniform as well. They deliberately talk in Yorkshire, what would you call it, tongue? But they'll say things like it's the only place you can get away with, hey up, how you doing? And all this sort of
Yeah.
thing. Because that's intentional and it's part of the experience.
Yeah.
Uh, and I thought, gosh, yeah, you can see how they are planning the whole customer experience, but we don't do that inside businesses, do we?
Yeah. And it's not about having every answer. Not you don't tell the person exactly what they're going to say to that guest. You don't want it to feel like scripted and robotic, but just thinking it through, putting yourself in that person's shoes and saying, how is this going to land with this person at every step? And then inviting them in and actually asking them through this process, what might you need? Revelation. So that you can put the effort in up front rather than unpicking it. I think you said something before about your client. If you don't get this right, if you don't put the effort in up front, you end up unpicking it at the end. So I always say choose your hard. So you can have the hard work unpicking it and trying to get everyone back on board at the end, or you can have a bit of hard work up front. But actually, it's quite fun. It's an interactive experience. It's not like death by spreadsheet. Actually, try and design something that people are going to find engaging. And the benefit of that is there will be bumps along the way and there's going to be resistance, but people will have your back because they've been heard, you've listened to them, you've involved them, you've cared about how they feel. So when things do go wrong, they're going to work the extra hours, they're going to put the extra effort in. Whereas if you just try and do it to them and present this beautiful package of change at the end, nobody can make that change what they want because it hasn't involved them.
And in your experience, is there a lot around changing IT software? So I'm background in HR, so I hear about a lot of HR professionals, particularly if they work in a multinational organization, where they'll say, oh, we've just been given this software to use and we don't know how to use it and it's not fit for purpose. So what kinds of change projects do you get involved in?
There is a lot of tech change. So, yeah, it might be a new CRM system or HR or finance system. So, that's a big investment for a company. They need to get that. But it's also things like the new 3 year plan or the 5 year plan. It could be a rebrand, it could be a restructure, and things like new products, new services, new processes, or new legislation. There's always something, isn't there? AI is the obvious one right now. So, everybody's just trying to get AI in. And for some organizations, like you said, sometimes it's big multinationals, and working with them, it's not realistic to get every single person involved. But there are ways there are always ways that you can bring it down to the team level and have people feel like they genuinely are listened to and heard.
And you
Yeah,
can see, and I don't know about your experience, but you can go into an organization, and when you do listen and hear people, they can go from this disengaged employee who sometimes, often, they will tell me, look, I'm looking to leave. Or they tell me post coaching often, oh, I was actually going to leave my job because I was really bored and disengaged. But by listening and hearing people, there's nothing I love more than seeing a person come to life
yeah,
and you see the best person in that business. Is that
yeah.
your experience as well?
I think there was a time in my life around 2016, there was just like a whole bunch of changes, and it just like really opened my eyes to like agency, which isn't a word that we use very much. That sense of I've got control, I can do stuff. And I love when I see that in other people, when something flicks in their minds and they're like, oh, I don't have to just be along for the ride. When I contribute my ideas, it makes a difference. And I just think that ability, that agency, feeling comfortable with change and like being able to play your part in a change, it's such an underused like commercial lever. It's not like a fluffy, this will make people feel cozy and nice. It's like they won't leave, they won't be looking for the next job because there's a load of problems here that they're willing to sort. They come with a problem solving attitude and that kind of growth mindset because it's switched on, isn't it? And if you want like an innovative team, an innovative organization that keeps pace with all the change that's happening, you need to mobilize people and give them some of your power so that they can get stuck in.
And from a coaching perspective, I think, and I don't know about you, you know, that word agency, that's what I love about coaching. It was
Yeah,
what changed my life as well, going from, they call it tethered elephant syndrome, don't they?
yeah,
You don't realize that you have the ability to change your life and your situation. It's incredible, isn't it?
yeah.
Can I just go back to something you said earlier about making sure that everybody is aligned towards the vision? What processes do you use? How do you do that? How do you ensure that everybody is on board and clear about that end point?
A lot of it is coaching questions, and a big part is just checking in with people. So if you've got a group of leaders in the room, just even asking them individually to write down what their version of that vision is quite revealing because quite often it's not that it's vastly different, but it will just be like a couple of degrees off course. And that's the thing where if they're not all aligned and it's not all in the same direction, when they go and speak to their teams, it's almost like Chinese whispers effect, isn't it? And every time something's communicated, it goes another little bit off course. So I think being really clear about what the change is, what's the problem you're trying to solve. So why is it important? And then why should people care? It might be important to you as a leader because you're going to increase your profit or increase efficiency. You're going to meet the target that you've set for yourself. But on the ground, our brains are trying to conserve energy. We've got enough to worry about. Why should I put in the extra effort to do this thing differently when actually at the moment I'm quite happy doing what I'm doing? It works for me.
Mm.
So you have to create with every change, there's like stuff that will move the change forward and the stuff that will hold it back. And you need to unpick that with the leaders, not just from their perspective, but opening their eyes that you have to then have that same coordinated vision with everybody else. So I talk about creating that thread. If you've got that vision at the top, how do you then link that to what I do every day as an individual and what I do as part of my team? And how does that contribute higher up the chain so that everybody's got something that sort of motivates them personally? And actually, part of that design process is also making sure you're not going too far away from your values. Because if people have bought into that and that's what they're expecting to see, if you then suddenly manage to change differently because it feels uncomfortable, that can often create a bit of resistance with people because they see like the actions don't match up with what they're expecting with the values.
Yeah, and we can get passionate about values as well. And
Yeah.
So the other day, again, working with a team, and they were having a real debate over the values. And you talk about 1 degree in the wrong direction. There was one leader that was brave enough to say, I don't think they're stretching enough. I think they need tweaking. And I've seen some leaders like literally at loggerheads over tables. What's your experience of going 1 degree away from either a value or from the vision? What's an example of that from your perspective so that the audience understands what that looks like?
Yeah, I think probably one of the strongest or most memorable experiences was trying to roll out new technology, a new system, and a new product in retail stores. It was stores across the UK. And from a project point of view, like that illusion of control was definitely there. The project plan was set up, the tech was all sorted and procured. But the people on the ground who had to use the new system and had to sell the new product to customers, it didn't fit with their values at all. And they were very straight talking about it all and just said, I'm not going to talk to customers about that product. I think if you don't take into consideration how people feel at the end of it, it doesn't matter how good your plan is and how well you stayed on budget, on time, all the rest of it, scope's all still there. If at the end of it, people aren't willing and able to talk about it confidently and use it confidently, all of that investment's just wasted. Some conversations with those people earlier on would have surfaced all that. And again, it's like you choose when you do the hard bit. Do you do it at the end and unpick it or at the start? Thankfully, that was a pilot. So we had one store and all of that came up. So we were able to then go back to the drawing board, design this experience, and get everybody back on the same journey. So when it was rolled out to other teams, we already had in the armory, we had the communication, the training, the support, the rationale behind it all that gave them the reassurance that it was a good product and kind of myth busting some of the things that were holding them back.
And correct me if I recorded this wrong. So design is your process, design, deliver, embed. Is that?
Yeah.
And because now would be a really good opportunity to share with the listeners what your framework is. How do we tie all of this up in an easy to remember bow?
So the design, deliver, embed are the three stages, but the hard work does happen at the design phase. And as I said before, that starts with getting everything that we know already out onto a page or a canvas, ideally a whiteboard if we're doing it face to face. So the model itself or the framework that I use, it's 5 C's. So the first one is clarity. Again, that everybody on the same page with a vision, what's changing and why. The next one's community. It's not a stakeholder like some sort of abstract. It almost feels a bit transactional, that word stakeholder. So community is about bringing people in, working together. What can everybody contribute? So the language there is really intentional too. So who's involved in the change? Who's going to make it happen? Who's going to be impacted by it? And then we can start to design the journey for those different groups. The next one is the communication. So again, what do people need to know, feel, and do at every stage of that journey? And then the coaching, the 4th C, is what training, what support, what guidance can we offer them? And then the culture wraps all that up with how do we like stitch it in now to everyday working. And in the middle of all that is impact, because impact is the thing that either moves the change forward or it holds it back. So for each of those, we keep stitching it back into the center. So if it's clarity, what's the impact? What are the benefits? What are the risks? What's the personal motivation? What's the personal resistance? So we keep like pulling all those threads back in. And once you've done a first pass of what you know already, you can keep building on that. So it's an iterative process. And when you're designing that journey, the delivery part almost falls out of it, but the delivery part for the people, it falls out of that process. And then the embedding is encouraging people to adopt it and putting everything in place to make sure they're set up for success at the end.
And in your view, how do you know when something is fully embedded?
You need to check all the way through that those milestones are being reached and people are at the point where you hope they are, hope they need to be at each stage. But at the end, it is ultimately about behavior change and it's about adoption. So if people are using a new system, if you're hearing them talk about things differently, you're seeing them do things differently, and they feel comfortable and confident in those new systems and ways of working, that's ultimately where you start to get the benefits delivered from the project.
And so, how do you test how people are feeling? Is it your employee opinion survey? What do you do?
That emotional thing's really interesting because the one bit of change training that leaders do sometimes get is the Kubler-Ross change curve.
Yeah.
And for anybody in change as a discipline, it makes you irk a little bit because it was never designed for change in organizations. But I think what people like about it is it describes that emotional roller coaster that you sometimes find yourself on when there is a change. And that's something that you can really relate to and start imagining a change that you've, and some of those things do fit. But rather than trying to shoehorn it into something that was designed for grief and how people experience death ultimately, you've got the opportunity to design it from scratch. So using those emotions along that journey is still valuable. First, just as a human being, put yourself in their shoes. What might they feel? And then if that's something which, if it's an emotion you don't want them to have, like shock, what can you do? Actually plan it in intentionally. What can you do to reduce that shock and warm people up and make sure it's part of a wider plan? In terms of how you measure it, you do need to get feedback from the actual people. You can guess to a certain extent, but you need to validate it with real humans who are going to go through it and who are going through it each step of the way. And how you do that does depend a little bit on the size of the organization, the structure, but getting line managers involved is really key on that.
And so, if Kubler-Ross is out the window, what's the alternative model that's more helpful in these big change projects that you're involved in?
There are lots of different models out there to do with change, but ultimately, you need to raise awareness of the change. You need people to understand the impact that the change is going to have on them. And then you need to unpack the motivation part. So, that kind of aim part of it is the beginning. And then, in terms of what comes after, they need to be capable of making the change. They need to take the action to actually do it. And then there's also like a nurturing phase where the work isn't done when the project goes live. It's how do you nurture that change, supporting people so it doesn't just drop off a cliff at the end. So there are stages that people will work through, but your response to them is never the same. My experience of change, I might have loads of baggage that I'm bringing from other projects. So how I experience that change is going to be totally different to somebody who sits next to me at work, and they might be really excited about something that's happening. So I think the important thing is to don't try and shoehorn people's emotions into something. Just take that common sense approach of what might they be feeling and how could you make it easier, and then validate it with them.
We were talking about the previous guest on the show. She's left you a question. So, Lisa Regal's question is, how much does stress impact your ability to succeed or feel fulfillment? And what do you do about it to mitigate stress?
Yeah, I think we've all had periods of stress, haven't we? Some stress is good, don't get me wrong, it gives you the kick up the bum you need. I think where stress has really ground me down is where I felt like I was pushing against a closed door. And I think the impact of that is everything just feels slower, it takes longer, it just feels harder, and you almost feel like the life is sucked out by the end of it. So I think if I'm stressed, it's definitely not me performing at my best. And I think it's taken me quite a long time to realize what those stress signs are and then put the right things in place to stop it going too far. And they're actually probably my daily non-negotiables. So for me, the way I deal with it, get outside every day. So whether it's a walk or a run or just sit in the garden if I haven't got time, but that time in nature, no matter how difficult the problem was or how stressful it was, you go outside and you think, a bit of perspective, you're just a speck in the ocean. It's not really that important. So that's helpful. And then obviously mentally, physically exercise is helpful. Really good food, making sure I cook every day. lots of treats as well, but good, like nice treats, proper treats. And then sounds so boring, but rest, like actually getting decent sleep, especially as I get older. The only other thing is breath work. I started that 2 years ago, and that has, yeah, I think in terms of regulating emotions, that was a complete revelation to me. I'd never come across it. So every day I practice it in some form in a small way. So yeah, that helps keep me grounded and on the right track.
That's great. And before I started this interview, I was thinking about stress just because I've got a workshop coming up with a bunch of leaders, and it's almost like we go about our business, don't we? We're out doing what we're doing, and our stress levels build up, don't they? And it's then sometimes it's to do with we are triggered by something, which is obviously the other area of my work. And sometimes it's just because we're so busy, aren't we? We're just too
Yeah.
busy doing. And it's thinking about what are all the things that we can do that where we empty that stress bucket. And that list you've given is great. It is, and I agree entirely with all of that stuff. Two questions though. First of all, what's a proper treat? What do you class as a proper treat?
Cake, which has got butter and sugar, like proper. If you're going to do it properly, go the full hog, but not like mono, some kind of chemical. Like just get the basic ingredients and they're like bread. It should be flour, water, and salt.
Yes.
Not hard, is it?
No. And then breath work. Any recommendations? What do you do? How does it work?
Yeah, the teacher I have, Sophie Kirkton, she's amazing. And the thing that changed it for me was it's not just about relaxation, it's about meeting your nervous system where it is. But sometimes you don't want to be really calm. Sometimes you can use your breath to almost meet your anxiety where it is and then come down slowly to the right point for you. Or sometimes you want to get a bit of energy, so you can use your breath to increase the amount of energy you've got. But I think for me, it's you get much more in tune with how you're feeling inside, that gut instinct and what your body needs on that day. And that, I think that's the most useful thing I find it for. Yeah,
Because
it's really good.
when you were talking about breath work, the only breath work I do is on my iWatch, where I'll do a
Yeah.
bit of, I did this lunchtime, sat on the swing seat, 3 minutes breathing, bit of relaxation before starting the afternoon. Fancy a chat? Or maybe you're interested in the optimized leader program next level. You can book a free 15-minute call by scanning the QR code on screen or see the link in my show notes. To summarize and thinking either about your career, your life, how you help people with change, what are 3 actionable tips that you recommend?
I would say, yeah, just be careful of that illusion of control. So think about how can you bring people in and collaborate? How can you co-create the change and share the problem? Because people are out there with really good ideas, really good experience. Invite them in. It doesn't have to be on your shoulders. Take that pressure off. And in doing that, yes, you'll lose a little bit of control and it'll be a little bit of hard work up front, but they'll stick with you. I'd encourage people to do that. I think to avoid getting really frustrated with change, know that there's only so much you can do. It's your responsibility. And then everything thereafter is the other person's responsibility. So don't take everything again on your shoulders. But equally, if it's not working out and you get that resistance to change, then it's not a bad thing. It's just information. So don't feel like you're hitting your head against a brick wall. If there's resistance from your team, there's just something missing. They just don't quite understand, or it doesn't make sense, or something else is more of a priority. So don't take it personally. Stick with what you can control. You can't control everything. Related to that is just try and be a compassionate leader, because when we're throwing these big changes in at work, they are important. Obviously, the business has to be profitable. You do need to make sure you're making the right commercial decisions. But people are finding life quite difficult right now, and you don't know what they're bringing to work every day. And everybody's experience of change will be different. So I think just acting with compassion and allowing them to have some kind of input makes a huge difference.
Wow, there was so much in all of that. What I've taken away from this is this thing about being intentional, planning a journey. And I hadn't really thought about change like that. So you've really broadened my perspective on it. I feel educated, and you are such a clear thinker. And that's what people stand to gain. Listening to you, the way you organise things. Davina, thank you so much.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Before we sign off, I'd like to invite you to my quick reflective practice called Pause, Reflect, Act. As your leadership coach, I'm here to help you translate today's insights into personal growth and your next steps. Answer the prompts that follow in your journal or notes. Alternatively, you can access my complimentary journal and self-coaching tool in the show notes, or scan the QR code you can see on screen now. So here's today's reflective questions, which are based on the podcast episode with Davina Ripton about leading change successfully. Number 1, the illusion of control. Where are you currently clinging to an illusion of control at work or home? What could you gain by letting go and inviting others to contribute? Number 2, resistance as data. When you encounter resistance, what is it trying to tell you? Is the missing piece clarity, involvement, trust, or something else? Number 3, choose whether it's hard at the beginning or at the end. Where are you avoiding upfront effort only to pay a higher price later on? Davina spoke about unravelling problems at the end of a change project and the fact that it can be more difficult then. What's one small step you can take today to address it? If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereed.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reed, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimizing Leader Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.